Hello, and welcome to Northern Plains Resource Council's Democracy Committee presentation this evening. I'm Noreen Freistadt of the Democracy Committee, and I wanted to tell you a bit about the work that we are doing. The committee formed last April around the concept that we needed to take action to protect our Montana State Constitution as it is written. Coming into the 2022 election season, you may have heard of efforts by some legislators regarding key sections of our Constitution that may be under threat of amendments or possible exclusion. Toward that end, our current campaign goal is to prevent any amendment to the Montana Constitution that would narrow our rights. In addition to the Constitution work, we are also closely following the redistricting process, as there is probably no greater determinant to legislative outcomes than how our districts are drawn, and therefore who has a seat at the table. By way of background, every 10 years, Montana redraws all 100 state House districts and then pairs those districts with our state's 50 Senate districts. The boundaries of those districts have a huge impact on who gets elected. Which brings us to our presentation tonight by Nancy Leifer of League of Women Voters. Welcome, Nancy. Nancy came from Missoula, or came to Missoula from Wisconsin in 1971 to study at the U of M. She earned a bachelor's degree in sociology, a master's in political science, and a PhD in interdisciplinary studies. Nancy also earned a Master of Public Affairs degree from Princeton University. She became a democracy nerd in 1973 when she was hired by the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation as the public participation specialist for the river basin study of the Flathead River in Western Montana. She worked in Montana state government from 1981 through 84 in the newly formed Montana Department of Commerce, ending as Division Administrator for Community Development. Then again from 2005 to 11 as the Home Ownership Program Manager for the Montana Board of Housing. Over the years, she worked with several Montana nonprofits, including the Institute of the Rockies, Northern Lights Institute, served as president and on the board of AERO, the Alternative Energy Resource Organization, and worked on affordable housing at both the local and state level for 20 years. After retirement, Nancy joined the League of Women Voters, served as president of the Missoula League, and is currently president of the board of League of Women Voters of Montana. Welcome, joining me in welcoming Nancy to the presentation on redistricting in Montana.
Thank you, Noreen. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to share my screen and let me just double check. Noreen, can you hear me? Okay, good. I'm going to share my screen and go right to the slideshow that I have for this evening. And we're going to be looking at Redistricting 101, legislative redistricting in Montana. And this is a crash course in redistricting. This being a league presentation, you're going to get a lot of information in a short time. So buckle up your seatbelts and hang on, because here we go. This is a lot of information about what's going on with redistricting in Montana and what's going on with redistricting, generally speaking, in the country. So the League of Women Voters undertook this People-Powered Fair Maps campaign because we wanted to help give people in all 50 states the ability to understand and engage in the redistricting process in their states. So in this presentation, we'll be spending just a brief amount of time on what the League of Women Voters is and why we're doing this. But then we'll get into the basics of redistricting, how redistricting is done in Montana, and how you can influence the process of redistricting in Montana. So the League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 to help women voters who were new to the process of voting in the United States. The Montana League is a nonpartisan volunteer organization. We do not endorse candidates or political parties. We work to support voter engagement and education for free and fair elections. Having fair districts that reflect the diversity of concerns of voters is an essential part of our representative democracy. In June of 2019, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the federal courts have no role to play in preventing partisanship in redistricting. And that shifted the focus for fair redistricting from the level of the federal government to the state level. Partisan manipulation of redistricting cuts across partisan lines. Both Democrats and Republicans draw maps that give themselves an unfair advantage when they can. This undermines responsiveness to voters. 41 states put redistricting in the hands of currently elected officials, leaving the process open to partisan manipulation. The League is spearheading efforts to reform and to create independent commissions where possible, to demand transparency in the process of redistricting, and to obtain maps that are fair to the voters. The goal of people-powered fair maps is to help citizens participate in the process to ensure that their communities are fairly represented. So what is redistricting all about, and why is it important? We elect people to represent us at various levels of government. As a first step toward fairness, the geographic areas that form the districts for these elections should contain the same number of people, or as close as possible, so that each elected official represents the same number of constituents. Every 10 years, after census data are complete, we have the information we need to redraw the geographic boundaries of congressional and legislative districts to reflect the changes in population. At the national level, this is called apportionment, allocating the 435 U.S. House of Representatives seats among the 50 states to reflect the changing distribution of population between the states. After the 2020 census, Montana was allocated a second U.S. House of Representatives seat. Similarly, population distribution changes within the state as well, requiring redrawing the boundaries of state legislative districts to ensure that each district represents about the same number of people. The boundaries of the district in which you vote determine who else will also be voting to elect the representative of that district. Under current law, the boundaries set up now will be the same for the next 10 years. Moreover, there is a fundamental principle of democracy at stake. Boundaries should be drawn so that voters can choose their representatives, not so that politicians can choose their voters. There is a name for politicians choosing their voters. It's called gerrymandering, and it was named after the governor of Massachusetts, who back in the early 1800s drew a district to include the voters he wanted. It represented a salamander, and since his name was Governor Gary, it became a gerrymander, which is pronounced more generally these days as gerrymander. Today, the term gerrymander refers to any map drawn to unfairly favor one political party. This diagram gives you an example of how it is possible to draw 5 districts with 8 precincts in each district in very different ways, given the same 40 precincts in the same spatial arrangement to start with. As you can see on the far left, this is what we have to work with. We have circles representing the precincts with majority circle party voters and stars representing the precincts with majority star party voters. The 2 diagrams in the middle illustrate how each party would draw the lines to maximize their own gains. So the drawing just to the left of center is drawn to make each district identical with 6 circles and 2 stars in each. These make very neat looking districts, but it also means that the circles would win all 5 districts. In the drawing to the right of center, there are 5 stars in 2 of the districts, guaranteeing that the stars would win 2 districts and the circles would win the remaining 3 districts. But as you can see, those districts are a little bit more odd in their shape. This, however, would be more representative of the distribution of voters in this whole overall area. The drawing on the far right illustrates how competitive districts could be drawn by creating 2 districts that each have the same number of stars and circles, creating districts in which either party could win. Montana is one of 9 states that has an independent commission. We were among the first in the nation to have an independent commission created by our 1972 Constitution. Montana's commission must comply with Montana's strict transparency laws that provide for the public to see and be part of the process. Commission meetings must be open to the public and broadcast on the Montana Public Affairs Network. Commission decisions must be preceded by opportunity for public comment, and all reports and documents of the commission are published on the commission's website. This is something that we take for granted in Montana, but being part of the League of Women Voters at the state level has introduced me to a number of leagues around the country, and this is not the case in many, many, many states. So we are very blessed to have a constitution that calls for such transparency. Montana's constitution requires the appointment of 5 independent commissioners, none of whom are current elected officials. This slide shows the members of Montana's current commission. 4 of the commissioners are appointed by the leadership of the majority and minority party of the Montana House and the Montana Senate. The 5th commissioner and the chair of the commission is nonpartisan and is chosen by the other 4 commissioners, unless, of course, they can't agree, in which case the 5th commissioner is chosen by the Montana Supreme Court. As you can see, the 5th commissioner in this commission was chosen by the Montana Supreme Court. This year, Montana was awarded a 2nd congressional seat through apportionment. State law gives the commission 90 days from the receipt of the census data to draw Montana's congressional districts. So if you thought perhaps that process was a little fast, you're right, it was. For the first time since the 1980 census, Montana's commission had to divide the state into 2 districts. The tight time frame required the commission to adopt a final map no later than November 14th of 2021. Here's a map of Montana's 2 new congressional districts. The new thing about the district drawing this year is that there are now software programs that allow for everyday citizens to be able to draw maps. And in this case, there were over 200 maps submitted by the public to Montana's commission in terms of how to draw this line. Through a process of map selection and public hearings, the commission adopted the final map, creating the 2 congressional districts for Montana that are in effect now. And under current law, these will be in effect through the federal election of 2030. Legislative districts in Montana include 100 House representative districts and 50 Senate districts. Senate districts always encompass a set of 2 House districts, so there are no new additional district boundaries to be drawn for the Senate. The commission began its work on legislative districts in the spring of 2022 and will give its final draft plan to the 2023 legislature for review. In Montana, the role of the legislature is advisory only. The legislature has no authority to change any decisions made by the commission under current law. Once the commission has received the legislature's comment, it adopts the final map. Here is a map of what the 100 House districts look like in Montana based on the census from 2010. These are the districts that are in effect right now. With the shift in population to the western part of the state, the new districts will look different. Montana's 2020 population indicates that state legislative representative districts will be based on 10,827 people per district. There are mandatory criteria that the commission must follow in drawing legislative districts. Districts must be equal in population, contiguous, compact, and protect minority representation. These criteria comply with state and federal law, and they do allow for a little flexibility in making all of the districts equal in population. The commission also adopted non-mandatory goals that they can consider once the mandatory goals are met. These goals include political fairness, political competitiveness, minimizing dividing cities, towns, counties, reservations, and communities of interest, and dealing fairly with those state senators who will have 2 years left in their terms when the new districts go into effect in 2024. This is where public comment comes into play. The commission must balance these goals in drawing the final map. Public comment helps the commission to determine how much weight to give each goal. So what is a community of interest? A community of interest is a geographic area in which people share common concerns that would be better represented if not divided between districts. Montana's commission wants to know where residents see themselves in communities of interest so that these areas can be taken into account in drawing legislative districts. It's important to note, however, that political interests such as party affiliation or candidate location are not a consideration for communities of interest. This is the list of the kinds of communities of interest that the Commission has adopted. It's important that a community of interest be defined by those within the community and not by outsiders. Here's an example of what a community of interest might look like. The area at the top of this map, circled by the yellow oval, is Bridger Canyon, an area north of Bozeman that is in Gallatin County, but is currently in District 59, which is colored red on the map, a district that is composed mostly of Park County and a portion of Sweetgrass County. The dark blue lines on the map are county boundaries. Gallatin County gained enough population in the 2020 census to add 2 additional legislative districts. So the people in Bridger Canyon, if they feel they predominantly work and go to school in Bozeman and use Bozeman as their trade area, they would share more common interests with Bozeman and Gallatin County than they do where they are currently with the Park and the other county. So they could provide public comment to the commission outlining their geographic area and their desire to be in a district in Gallatin County connected to Bozeman. The overwhelming majority of voters here in Montana and across the country want maps to be fair. They want to elect their representatives, not have their representatives choose their voters. Here are some of the factors that make a map fair. Up until the 2000 Commission, state legislative districts were drawn in ways that diluted the voting impact of the Native Americans. In the 2000 and the 2010 commissions, they created more majority Native American legislative districts, making it possible for Native Americans to elect legislators in about the same percentage as Native Americans are in the state's population as a whole. For example, there were 12 Native Americans in the 2021 Montana legislature, about 8% of the total, while Native Americans constituted about 7.5% of the state's population, according to older census data. The 2020 Commission will draw new districts that, to be fair, should allocate Native American voters in such a way that they can elect representatives in equal numbers to their percentage of the population now. Another factor is partisan bias. In theory, if one party gets about 60% of the votes for the state legislators, then that party should get about 60% of the legislative seats. That would be fair. This outcome does not have a partisan bias. It matches the distribution of party voters overall. Political scientists have developed mathematical calculations that, when considered together, help to identify partisan bias. Analysis of Montana's legislative districts since the 1972 Constitution show very little partisan bias in the way that the districts have been drawn since 1972. Data from past elections chosen by the current commission as representative of voting patterns in Montana now show that Montanans have about 43% of voters who vote Democrat and about 57% of voters that vote Republican. To avoid partisan bias, this distribution would be similar to the share of seats in the Montana legislature for each party, or to the share of districts that have a partisan lean in these two directions. Fairness to voters is enhanced when individual districts have similar numbers of voters from each party, making the district politically competitive. Safe districts are those that always elect a legislator from the same party, and they have a detrimental effect on voters. Safe districts encourage the selection of more extreme candidates in the primary, but they discourage voting in the general election. What's the point? Everyone knows which candidate will win. and they provide no incentive for legislators to represent the full diversity of their district. Competitive districts encourage selection of more moderate candidates in the primaries, encourage voter turnout, and require legislators to involve themselves with a wider diversity of constituents' concerns if they are going to be reelected. Montana's commissioners want to hear from citizens. Ultimately, citizen input should be the deciding factor in drawing a line in a specific way. This can only happen if citizens express their comments, concerns, and ideas to the commission. Now is your chance to speak up and let the commission know what is important to you. One thing you can do is increase awareness of redistricting in your community. Redistricting may not be familiar to others. You can help increase awareness by talking with your friends and neighbors, or by having the League make this presentation to community groups. You can track the next steps in the process on the Commission's website and sign up for updates from the Commission. Which goals of the Commission are most important to you in drawing fair maps? The Commission must balance these goals as they divide the state into districts. People can submit comments in written form, and people can also provide live testimony at hearings or commission meetings, either by being present in the hearing room or via Zoom. On August 2nd, the Commission released 4 maps for public comment. The Commission has hearings scheduled on these proposed maps in August and September, with an additional hearing coming in November and a final map selected by the end of December. The final map will be given to the legislature for 30 days of review in early January. The Commission has 30 days after that to finalize and adopt the map. Again, new districts for Montana State Legislature go into effect for the 2024 election. Here's the list of hearings on the Commissioner's proposed maps, the 4 maps that they have just put out for public comment, and these hearings will be in August and September. Not all of these hearings will be live streamed. However, the 3 Zoom hearings will be live streamed through the Montana Legislature's site. The hours and locations for the live hearings are intended to allow diverse citizens to come and provide comment. All of the live hearings have hours available in both the afternoon and the early evening. To participate in one of these in-person hearings, all you need to do is just go to that location within the hours specified on the website. Zoom hearings and all regular commission meetings are live streamed through the Montana Legislature's Watch and Listen site. Anyone can go to this site and either watch the meeting live or go back and watch a recording of a past meeting. To actively participate and offer comment in a Zoom meeting, you must register in advance following the instructions on the Commission's website. The Commission is accepting written comments all the time. Instructions for how to send in written comments are on the Commission's website. Written comments can be submitted via email or using the comment form that's available online, or you can send in hard copy mail in the way that goes through the U.S. Postal Service. Another option for comment is to use the interactive comment function on each map. By clicking on a portion of the map you wish to comment on, you open up a comment box that allows you to type in your comment right on the map. You can also read comments submitted by others. The best place to start in terms of trying to get more information and more resources is to go to the Commission's website that has information about upcoming meetings, maps, and instructions on how to provide comments. The League of Women Voters also has resources on its website that can help you get started, including a downloadable worksheet on how to prepare testimony, and a link to the Montana Commission's website as well. The mission of the League of Women Voters is to help citizens and voters get the information they need to participate in government. Thank you all for your attention to this presentation. For those who are interested, the League of Women Voters is a membership organization open to men and women 16 years of age and older. Membership in the League includes 3 levels of League presence and action. At the local level in Billings, Bozeman, Helena, and Missoula. At the state level with the League of Women Voters of Montana, and at the national level with the League of Women Voters US. You can find out more information about the League at our website. During 2022, Montana's commission will divide the state into 100 House districts that will also form the base for the 50 Senate districts. These districts will remain in effect for the next 10 years under current law. The commission wants to hear from Montanans. Can't get my page to turn. Wait 1 second. Now is the opportunity to be part of this process and to ensure that our independent Montana Redistricting Commission divides the state into districts that are fair to all of the people in Montana and reflect your concerns. So thank you for this opportunity to present this information. And it's time now to go back and look at questions.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That was great information. Presented in a really clear format. So thank you for that. That's great. So yeah, we're going to, as Shane said earlier on, you can type questions into the chat room and let's see if we've got anybody that started. Spain, did you want to manage the chat room or did you want me to do that?
Go for it, Noreen.
Okay. Okay, it looks like we've got one question here, Nancy. Can you go back to the topic of gerrymandering? I'd always thought that was mostly done through the size and shape of districts, like the salamander example that you showed.
Sure. So the interesting thing about gerrymandering is that it really depends on the impact of what the districts do in terms of partisan lean one way or another, and doesn't have anything to do with what the actual district looks like. I think if we go back to the example, if you call up in your mind the example of the diagram of the stars and circles, the most gerrymandered map of that was the one that had all of the districts perfectly uniform. There were 6 circles and 2 stars in each one, and they were very neat and very nice. But that particular map would have given the entire 5 districts, all would have been won by the circle party, and the star party would have had no representation at all. So it isn't, you can't go by the shape of the district. You need to go by what the impact is on the partisan lean and the partisan effect on who's in those districts. The one just next to that, which did have 3 districts going to the circles and 2 to the stars, those had more irregular boundaries. And so that's the key thing in gerrymandering, is that you need to look at it based on its impact, not based simply on what it looks like in terms of the boundaries. There is an example of that right now, actually, with the maps that have been put out for public comment. 2 of the maps would create a 15% advantage to the majority party, and the other 2 maps do not. So the map that does create that 15% advantage over and above the majority party's actual share of voters in the state, that map was drawn because it has very nice, neat boundaries around the various districts. That was the criteria that they were trying to maximize when they drew them. And so maximizing that criteria doesn't necessarily give you a fair map. So you need to be able to look not just at what the actual districts look like, but you need to look at what is the impact in terms of the partisan lean in those districts as well, to see whether or not it's been gerrymandered.
Great, thank you. So the lesson to be learned is that we need more education as to what these maps are looking like, because most of us will tend to think that that big, soft, even lines look fair. So somehow that education point's got to get out there.
Right, absolutely.
Okay, here's another question for you, Nancy. How do you balance competitive districts with representing groups with common interests?
And that is a very, very tough question to deal with in Montana. The difficulty in Montana is that, as I mentioned earlier in the slideshow, each district in Montana has 10,827 people, more or less, which is not a whole lot of people. And so it depends on how large you have in terms of your common interest groups, how geographically large they are, and how they correspond with voting groups. One of the difficulties we have in Montana is that if you just look at partisan lean information, a lot of the people who vote Democrat live in urban areas, and a lot of the people who vote Republican live in rural areas. And it's difficult to try to figure out how to combine those in districts that are more evenly balanced when they're geographically pretty much segregated to a large extent in terms of where people live. So that is a very interesting question, and trying to get competitive districts under that circumstance is something that I think we have probably some upward limits of how far we can go in that direction, simply because of Montana's geography and because of the degree to which the majority party actually has a lot more people voting than the minority party has.
Do any states ignore the two major political parties and just create geographically contiguous districts that you're aware of?
Sure. So I think the interesting thing about how states do draw their boundaries is that 41 states have their legislatures draw their boundaries. And where you have legislatures where the House is one party and the Senate is a different party, you have some degree of opportunity for those two groups to end up with a map they both agree on. So that they will draw that map, and it could very well be that they can create just geographically contiguous districts. In states where you have both the Senate and the House in the hands of one party, what you tend to get are very much boundaries for the districts that are drawn to benefit that party. And the fact the League was a party to the lawsuit that was taken all the way to the Supreme Court, the League was in there on behalf of Republicans in, I think it was Maryland, and on behalf of the Democrats in Pennsylvania, because they were both doing the same thing. So it's whoever the majority party is tends to want to do that. So how you make competitive districts and how can you draw those contiguous districts is pretty much up to the politics of each individual state. And it's underneath it all. It's really the politics that's driving what's going on, I think.
I just want to mention, because what you've just talked about is another example of how our Montana Constitution upholds process that is fair, that is not being handed to the legislature. It's formed of, the legislature's input, certainly the majority and minority leadership, but it does all come back to Montana's Constitution.
It does, and which is part of your whole committee's reason for being here, is because of Montana's Constitution. So yes, thank you. Yeah.
Here's another question. Given that votes are secret, do you know how they get the data to model the different maps?
That's a very good question. So when Montana's commission was in the process of trying to figure out what would be fair in terms of partisan distribution on their congressional map, what they ended up doing was going back and looking at how precincts ended up voting for the couple of representative races that took place in the last few years, including the special election in 2017, when our elected Representative Zinke went to become an official in the national government. We had to replace that person. We had to replace him with someone else. You can look at voting data at the precinct level and see how precincts lean one way or the other, and then pull that together based on the new lines to see, because usually they try not to divide precincts, so that you can see where a new line would have put this set of precincts here and that set of precincts there. Go back and look at then who would have been elected, and that would give you a sense of what the partisan lean might have been. So given that they did that for the congressional races and trying to figure out where to draw the line for the congressional districts. When it came time to do the legislative districts, the commission decided to use 10 elections that they selected to be the base from which they would do some analysis of how partisan lean plays out in Montana. And those 10 races are available in one of the programs that you can use to assess what's going on with the various maps that have been proposed. It's in Dave's redistricting. So what they've done is they've taken those 10 races and averaged them and come up with a sense of, okay, how would this precinct have been over those 10 races? How many times did it go Republican? How many times did it go Democrat? And then they get a sense of what's the partisan lean for that particular precinct. It's a lengthy process. It's time consuming, but that's where that data comes from. And that's what they'll be looking at in terms of assessing how that all comes out. And, you know, maybe it would be helpful for me to take people to the site of the actual commission and give you a quick tour of where to find things. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, let's just do, I've got one more question here for you.
Okay.
And let's do that. So you earlier referred to under current law. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that phrasing and its relation to the subject?
Sure. So there is a lawsuit that is going to be considered by the United States Supreme Court in its coming session that starts in October of 2022. And this lawsuit is hinging on the interpretation of that part of the US Constitution that defines how elections are determined in this country. The current interpretation of that passage of the Constitution is that the federal government can override whatever the states are doing. But there is a push to see, well, is there an interpretation of that clause that would give the states ultimate power and push the federal government into the backseat position on that? And if that court case gets decided during the next session in favor of state legislatures, then it would essentially say the body for determining all aspects of elections at the state level are state legislatures. And that would throw out all independent commissions all around the country, and redistricting would be done by state legislatures. Now, that course is coming up next year. We don't know how it's going to be decided, but for now, we have an independent commission in Montana, and we have had since 1972, and that is the way that we're going to be going forward on our redistricting at this point.
Great. I think there is interest for you to go to the redistricting website if you can. Nancy, that would be helpful.
Okie doke. Let me see if I can make this work here. Yes. So here is the Montana redistricting website, and you can get there by simply Googling Redistricting Commission Montana, and it will lead you to this site. And as you can see across the top here, there's the home page, there's the about, there's maps, meetings, and contact. So about takes you to all of these nice places that you can go, like how to participate, which is very helpful. Also gives you a document library of past things that the commission has had in terms of documents they were looking at, and other resources that you can have to learn more about redistricting. Here's the one for maps. And again, at this stage of the game, the congressional maps are all over and done with. So we want to look at legislative maps. And there are just a minute, I got to move this bar out of the way here. On legislative maps, there are two choices. You can go with maps proposed by the commission or submitted state legislative maps. What we want to be doing now is looking at the state legislative maps proposed by the commission. That's where you go to find the 4 maps that have been proposed by the commission. And here they are, map 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can view the map by clicking on view map. If you want to look more at the Dave's redistricting information about the map, you click on this little plus sign. And then it gives you the option to view it in Dave's redistricting. So that's where you go. Here's some basic statistics about each map in terms of the legally required criteria of what the range is of how much population is in each one and what the variation is there. This is where you can go to find the criteria and goals. And this is where you go to find the competitiveness metrics. And that's the one that gets into the partisan bias. This tells you a whole sheet about how to go in and look at which were the elections that the commission chose to be the ones that they were going to be looking at. So that's one way to do it. Here's where you go for meetings. And this is the archives of all of the meetings that have happened in the past. And if we go back to the home page, here is the easier way to figure out where to go right now. Here's how to participate, how you can help attend meetings. Here's where you can see what the regional meetings are going to be. So here's the regional meeting schedule. And you can see here the location, the city, the date, and also what hours they're going to be taking testimony in those live meetings all around the state. So for example, people in Helena, there isn't one in Helena, but if you want to go to the Great Falls one, it's September 7th from 9 to 12 and from 1:30 to 5. In Bozeman, it's from 1 to 5, 6:30 to 9. In Missoula, it'll be at the law school from 9 to 12 and 1:30 to 5. So there you can see that gives you all the information you need to go in person to one of those hearings. If you're interested in giving written comment, you can also do that by sending in written comments. And here's again a button you can click that tells you all the different ways that you can submit a written comment. Here's a comment form you can fill out online. And that's the easiest way to do it right there. So let's go back to the home page for a moment. And yeah, these three buttons pretty much take you to everything you need right now in terms of regional hearings, doing the maps, and how to participate. So that's what I think I'll stop sharing. And we'll get back to.
Great. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any final questions to Nancy at all? You know, put them in the chat. I think we've gotten through the ones that were there. So if hearing no other comments or questions, I think that we want to thank you, Nancy, for taking the time, putting together such a great presentation. It was very clear, very easy to understand, and doing the little website tour, I think, is really helpful. It looks like they've done a good job of clearly putting the information out. So that's great. So, so I think that this concludes our evening's presentation. I do want to make one little final comment here. Northern Plains is, Northern Plains Resource Council is just a reminder that we're a nonpartisan organization, and this presentation is to give people tools to understand what's going on and to participate. We are not entering into a political dialogue through this. We're just hopefully giving the public the tools they need, and I really feel like Nancy's done an excellent job of that tonight for us. So thank you so much, and good evening to everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.